All right, welcome to Halitics. I'm Hal Ginsberg. So glad to talk to you today. It is Monday. It's an Arlen Grossman Monday. How you doing, Arlen?
I'm doing well. As I was saying, the weather here is beautiful. I can't complain. It's been sunny all the time and really nice. And I was mentioning I went to a movie over the weekend that I wanted to tell you about it at some point. Maybe we can. And
Well, since you brought it up, you said it stars a long in the tooth Anthony Hopkins, but I don't think you lose your acting skills as you age. You said he certainly hasn't.
right. No, he was good. You want me
And
to
what was the
briefly?
name again? Tell me the name again,
It's called
Arlen.
One Life. And what
One Life.
it's about a British guy who goes over to Czechoslovakia at the beginning, just before World War II started. And he sees all these people trying to leave, but they can't, as the Nazis are starting to, move toward them. And he sees all these people who can't get away. And the bottom line is, at the end of the story, he saved like 669 children. And he was able to save them, and they were able to go to safety. And it was
Is this a true story?
It is a true story. Yeah, it is a true story.
A lot of Holocaust movies still coming out, and World War II movies. There was a movie that was up for an Academy Award. I don't think it won, but maybe Best Director. Now I can't remember. It was about. It was based on a Kingsley Amis sort of historical novel, which takes as its kind of backdrop the life of Rudolf Höss, who was the commandant at Auschwitz, and how he lived in this kind of bucolic house that was in the shadow of the death camp with his family, living, having picnics and enjoying a upper middle class lifestyle while they could even hear the screams of agony of those behind the walls. I don't know. Are you familiar with that movie?
No, it sounds familiar. Fortunately, this movie we just saw, it doesn't have those kind of grim scenes, people dying and all that kind of thing. But it does show the desperation of people as they tried to, get away from the Nazis. And it took place just before the very beginning of World War II when they invaded Poland.
Yeah, the movie that I was referring to is called The Zone of Interest. The Zone of Interest. And that's, I guess, because they live in that zone of interest where the death camp, the most notorious and the one where the most killing transpired, Auschwitz. We've got Arlen with us. Don't forget, I want you to subscribe. If no one else wants to subscribe, I want you to subscribe. This is Hal, it's Halitics. And we were at 198. I lost somebody. Sorry, you've lost.
I want people.
Well,
to
Arlen needs
too.
you to subscribe too, because why should he waste his time coming on a program if there aren't a lot of listeners, viewers, whatever term you want to use? So definitely,
By the way, Hal, I wanted
register
to
your. Go ahead.
Excuse me. I want to ask how your St. Paddy's Day was.
Well, I was calling it St. Paddy's Day.
I know.
And I think you may have seen that in honor of Life of the Potty. Would you call it a children's book, or is it more a humorous book?
I'd call it like children's book, middle school type.
Gotcha. Kind of people who enjoy potty humor.
Yeah, those are the kind of, that age is hopefully the age that they do.
Well, I would think it is, except for my sons, that age has not, ended, even though they're now in their mid-20s. Arlen, let's get to it. You mentioned, I guess, World War II, Germany, the fascism. I think that's an appropriate jumping off point for our first story, where I think we've already gotten into it. We're already in quite a bit of disagreement. But my headline, as I recast what the New York Times said, how Trump's allies are winning the war over disinformation. That's what the New York Times calls it. My question is, must we restrict rights to save democracy? Is the New York Times right? Is censorship freedom, Arlen?
Well, it's something that we have to be very careful about, obviously. It's not, I don't think it's real easy to say, what's black, what's white. I mean, I think there has to be some control, some censorship to a point. I mean, you can't just go on the air and say, hey, all black people should be killed. Let's start now. Or all Jews should be cremated, or whatever. There has to be you can't cry fire in a crowded theater. So there has to be some restrictions and some rules.
Well, and isn't that the question? What is crying fire? What is crying fire in a crowded theater? When is it crying? Like, for example, your statement that, we should enslave, you didn't say it, but, to go back to history, black people should be slaves, Jews should be exterminated. Is that the same really as crying fire in a crowded building? I mean, I'm not saying it is, but I'm not saying it isn't either. In Germany, it certainly is. You cannot demean groups. You cannot defame groups of people. In Germany, I believe in France, the law is the same. Is that the same as yelling fire in a crowd building? A, and B, should that be the law? I mean, why shouldn't people be free to say, I mean, I don't want to even give examples because I will get in trouble. But as a Jew, I don't want anyone calling for the extermination of my people. But the question I would come to is, when is it defamation? When is it fair game? When does it become defaming an entire group? And when is it defaming a group if you say Israel is committing genocide? That's what the president of Columbia or the vice president Roseberg said, that I can understand why an Israeli would be all upset and feel like they're under attack if you say that Israel's committing genocide. Is that something that should be suppressed? I guess the question I'm asking you is, where's the line? Where do we draw the line? And who draws it?
Yeah, well, it sounds to me like you really want censorship because you don't like it when people say Jews should be exterminated. So
I don't like it. I don't like it, but the fact that I don't like something doesn't necessarily mean it should be illegal.
Yeah, ideally there should be no censorship, of course, but I think we have to, make some rules, draw some lines, because there's a lot of really bad stuff going out there, and
So who makes the rules and who enforces those rules?
That's very tricky, Hal. I don't have any real good answer, but I think we ought to at least make an effort to, have some kind of controls over this kind of social media. Somebody like Elon Musk, he just puts crazy stuff on, doesn't care, doesn't mind if somebody wants to demean, races or, just say crazy things. He's okay with it, but other people are not. Yeah, it's not easy. There's no question.
Well, again, I mean, just, when you talk about personalities, you lose me immediately. I'll just be honest, Arlen. I deal in specifics. What specifically has Elon Musk allowed on Twitter that you think is strong evidence that we need to censor social media companies? And how then would we do it?
Well, I don't know that Twitter or X, has any kind of restrictions. I don't know for sure, but they seem to get away with all kinds of things that they didn't used to get before the current owner took over. So, I mean, they're just, there has to be some kind of rules, and how we get them or how we figure out what rules they're going to be is something that a lot of people have to get together, the whole government, Congress, the court, whatever. But I don't think it could just be unleashed total freedom and you can say whatever you want, because, hey, I can, like you were mentioning before, I could say somebody's a pedophile and, they should be arrested and,
Well, that you can't say. You can't specifically, that's defamation. If you say somebody committed a heinous act and it's not true, or you don't have the evidence to support it, or you should know it's false, you cannot say that. That is
Isn't that
illegal.
a form of censorship, Hal?
Well, I'm not saying there should be zero censorship, but that's not even government censorship. That's censorship by private enforcement. You can sue the person who says that. And I think in general, we don't see that many examples of this happening. But when it does happen, if the Monterey Herald published something nasty about you, you can sue them in court. It's not the government, though, that's enforcing that. It's you. But yeah, there are limitations. There's limitations. We agree the FCC, The airwaves are public, so therefore you can't say anything on radio, on TV, but very, very few restrictions in social media. And I think that's the way it should be. I think generally, Arlen, what we should rely on is a marketplace of ideas where the better ideas win. I think a big reason that there's so much dependence on social media is because corporate media continues to present a very biased, one-sided view and also a limited view. So in the New York Times, for example, there in 2016, 2020, Bernie Sanders, both times got about 40% support from the American public. There wasn't one op-ed writer in the New York Times who supported Bernie Sanders. Donald Trump has over 40% of support. There isn't one op-ed writer in the New York Times who even expresses any sympathy for the viewpoints of those who support Donald Trump. It is just contempt, dripping with contempt, scorn for Sanders, not for Sanders supporters so much, but for Trump supporters, scorn heaped upon scorn. So because of that, because there's such a limited amount of media out there, people are going to social media to express their views. And just regarding Musk, just want to throw that out there. Yeah. You can see there, actually, Twitter has consistently taken down requests by governments to strike tweets and X's that are not that the government specifically don't like. Those requests came mainly from Turkey, Germany, and I think the third country. Well, I'll get that there in a second. It was countries that aren't real free. Germany's pretty free, but they have limits because of Holocaust laws. But Turkey and India because there was anti-Hindu posts that also were pro-Muslim, because India is cracking down, is oppressing and persecuting Muslims. So in India, there are a lot of pro-Muslim posts and that also document or demonstrate or show images of Muslims being persecuted by the Hindu majority. And those posts in India are taken down at the request of the Hindu government there. So I would assume you think those are bad examples of censorship.
Well, I know you don't like the way New York Times, puts their columnists and their viewpoints. But then the other side of the coin is, what about Fox News and Newsmax and Breitbart and InfoWars and all the lies and things like that? I think they're a little bit worse myself than the New York Times. I think the New York Times at least makes an attempt to be fair, but these other media, I think, do not. And
okay, and I'll give you that. Yeah. I'll give you that. There is a Republican and a Democratic media in the United States. Is there a Bernie Sanders media? Is there a true democratic socialist media? Is there any media out there that says that AOC is too corporate? Because I don't think there is. So it may well be, yes, you do get even a populist right, not a democratic populist view. You get a populist right view. Is there a democratic populist view that has a real presence in any privately owned or corporate media?
It's pretty hard to find, Hal, if there is. Yeah. I mean, right now, the right wing, the MAGA people are dominating, all the, media out there. They're not. We just said they're clearly not dominating all the media.
They don't dominate the New York Times. They don't dominate the Washington Post. They don't dominate the Daily Kos where you write. My question to you, is there any media out there that's democratic populist? Bernie Sanders, to the left of Bernie Sanders. Is there any media out there that's calling right now for us to put down our arms, to stop fighting in Ukraine and Israel? Because I don't think there is. To stop, to call for peace in those countries. I don't think there is. I don't know any. And let me just one more point, Arlen, and then I'll give you lots of time because I know I always do this and it's not fair to you. Are you aware of any newspapers out there that are saying we need Medicare for all, that this is the right policy?
No, there might be some, but I'm not aware of any. And I think one of the bigger problems we should talk about too is the fact that newspapers are disappearing all over and and the ones that are taking up the slack are these, right-wing MAGA type, giant, TV stations and radio stations and, social media. I mean, they're very more passionate now than the liberal left wing.
So why do you think people have stopped consuming so-called liberal media? Is it because the liberal media doesn't really present a pro-worker viewpoint, doesn't present a pro-poor people viewpoint? The New York Times doesn't have a labor, for example, reporter anymore. There's no pro-peace voice in the New York Times.
Well, there are some, left-wing type, liberal type progressive writers in the New York
No
Times.
left-wingers, right? No left-wingers.
Well, not to the point where you would probably like them, and maybe I might like to see too. But
well, isn't that a huge problem, Arlen? Doesn't that totally frustrate you? Because those set the bar as far to the left as you can go. If you start censoring social media, where are people going to go who are saying we must have, much better jobs for working people in this country? We must have, every American should have health care from cradle to grave. Where are you going to find those voices if you tell, Joe Biden that he gets to decide what's on Twitter and what isn't?
Well, people could go to Halitics. You get those point of views on.
Well,
Halitics.
They could maybe, but what if YouTube decides to send people elsewhere, or when I start talking about how evil Israel is, that causes my program to be deprioritized or lose the algorithm, which many people want, which many people in government want. They don't want pro-Palestine views in media.
Why do you think it is that we don't have that much left-wing media, that we don't have the kind of, media that you're talking about that I would like to see too? I mean,
because, we do have it. You do have it on social media. You do have some pretty far to the left live streamers who are pretty successful. I don't always agree with them. I take issue with things that Brianna Joy Gray says. I take issues with what Revolutionary Blackout Network says. But they are presenting a real democratic socialist worldview, which I think is, and they're popular. They make money. They're able to survive. So their view is on social media, but it's not in corporate media. The reason it's not in corporate media, I'll answer your question. There's two reasons. One, I have to say from my bitter experience, it wasn't that profitable. It was barely profitable when it was profitable at all. So there's that. But the other reason is because the people who own media are very rich, and they don't want higher taxes on themselves. They don't want greatly reduced wealth and income inequality. They profit from for-profit healthcare and the death panels that the insurance companies have put in place. So the way the media is set up right now, you have to be extremely rich, extremely powerful to own. Look, what's his name? I said we were talking about profitability. The Amazon owner, Bezos, has lost many millions of dollars owning Washington Post. It's not profitable at all. And I don't think New York Times is profitable now either, maybe barely. But he's lost a ton of money. But he's been willing to endure the losses because he's promoting a neocon, neoliberal viewpoint that is very good for his business.
Yeah, and I think Bezos can afford to lose a few million here and there, considering he's got, what, $100 billion?
$150 billion, just like Musk does. Yeah. So you have billionaires who own the media, whether it's social or whether it's newspapers.
Yeah, I agree. And that's one of the bigger problems is the media is owned by corporations, all the networks, all the big, TV stations, all that, they are owned by, the corporate media. I mean, by corporate owners and big companies and billionaires.
But that's not true for Halitics. That's not true for the bigpicturereport.com. Those are not owned by billionaires or super wealthy people who are dependent on billionaires to get even richer. So that's another reason I believe it's very important we don't let the government censor social media.
Well, again, it's just a question of how far do you go? What you have to have some censorship. I think we agreed with that. You agreed with me on that. I mean, there has to be rules. So, what the rules are is going to be a problem, and it's going to be difficult to decide. So, I hope people at least start thinking of ways that we can put some kind of controls on, without
Well,
making
it's tough.
private
I mean,
government.
you raise a good point. I think you do, but I think, and I'll make this, and I just put this up here. TikTok faces call for ban amid claims of anti-Israel indoctrination. So U.S. lawmakers, both parties, bipartisan, are now pushing for TikTok to be, sold by the Chinese, and I don't really object to that. I think our media should be American owned. I get that, but the motivation behind it is, to my way of thinking, very, very scary. If you promote a view that's pro-peace, if you promote a view that's anti-Israel, if you promote a view that our corporatized military-industrial complex doesn't find profitable to them, then you could be forced to sell your media company.
Well, yeah, you definitely have to be very careful about where all the rules come from, and if they're, going to be fair, and that's a big problem. And I don't know who's going to make those kind of decisions.
Well, going through that New York Times article, it raised all sorts of hackles and all sorts of fears, because the examples that they give aren't what I would call particularly compelling as arguments for why we should have, and they start with that, what happened in the Capitol riot, if you want to call it that. And I guess that's fair. I mean, look, the then president of the United States was called for this big gathering, to try to use a non-loaded term. And it was pretty clear, I think, to everyone that there was going to be, he had been, questioning the legitimacy of the election. And this was a scary time. And I get that. And, maybe there should have been, I'm not sure how you would do it, but yes, put in place some limits on what the president, or on what anyone can say, and have the social media companies try to, weed it out or what have you. But the bottom line is, I mean, people wanted to believe Trump. That's what they wanted to believe. I mean, he was the president. He said something, and his view was accepted by some people. And there were a lot of ways this could have been handled. I mean, it's not just, it seems to me that democracy does mean you get to petition your government with grievances. The problem wasn't that people even gathered on the mall. The problem was that those people then tried to get into and did succeed in getting to the Capitol. That's where the issue is. And it seems to me that could have been dealt with so much more easily to than what actually happened. Like, why wasn't Congress, why didn't Nancy Pelosi's team keep an eye on all this and say, you know what, there are going to be a lot of people out there, they're going to be pissed off at us. They don't like the fact that their president went down to defeat. They don't believe he really lost fairly. So let's make sure we've got, thousands of police everywhere to protect us.
Well, Hal,
wouldn't that have been a better solution?
That's not Nancy Pelosi's job, Hal. They had other people that should have been.
Whose job is it?
Security.
Well, she was the Speaker of the House at the time, I believe. So yeah, I think it is her job. It is her job. Sure, it is.
No, it isn't. It isn't her job. There's other people, and especially the president, who happened to be Trump, who didn't push anything that would be security minded for this event, even though he obviously knew what was going to happen because he planned it, and there was a lot of planning involved in this.
Well, he knew there was going to be a rally. I don't know if he knew they were going to storm the Capitol, whether he did or didn't. Even if you want to say it wasn't Nancy Pelosi's job, which I don't accept, because as the Speaker of the House, I believe she is responsible for security at the Capitol. But that said, Metropolitan Police Department, U.S. Capitol Police, U.S. Park Police, the FBI, all those organizations are all responsible for law enforcement, and they aren't in the pocket of Trump. Certainly the FBI wasn't. The FBI hated Trump and was determined to bring him down.
You know what the right wing is trying to say right now is that Trump called for 10,000 National Guard to come into the Capitol that day. And they're trying to push that, even though there's no evidence to show that.
Right. And we all know that. And that's right. And that's the cure for bad speech, is correct speech. To say, okay, this is the way it is. It's not true. When he claims he called for security, he didn't really do it. That's all you have to do.
Yeah, but
right?
You got an entire quote, political party who wants to believe everything that Trump says. He's pretty much taken over the entire so-called party. He's all the moderates are quitting or getting pushed out. The Republican National Committee is being taken over, by MAGA people and his relatives. And so, you got a problem there. And so you're going to hear a lot of lies, and they're going to be pushing, all these lies, and a lot of people are going to believe it, especially on the right.
But people believe lots of things all the time. People believe what they're reading in the New York Times. People believe that a woman who was not raped in Israel was raped, even after her family said, and I've heard this from people, even after her family said, no, I don't know why they said she was raped. She wasn't raped. Yes, she was killed. Yes, Hamas murdered her. She wasn't raped. But the New York Times said it.
I don't know why that's
believe it.
For you, Hal, because there was plenty of stories of people who were raped. And
there's not one. There's not one. There's not one person who's come forward and said I was raped. There's not one. I remember you sent me an email because I said to you, give me examples. I kept saying to you, examples. And you finally sent me one. And the example was from a group that was completely discredited in the wake of October 7 or October 7 for fabricating stories. So there's not one documented case of sexual assault or rape by Hamas on October 7th. It just hasn't happened.
These are hard. These are not easy to document. Okay, it's not.
That's not even true either. There's plenty able to document. You get pictures. You have forensic evidence. You have semen. You have people on their cell phones who can say, "I saw this. Here's what I saw."
Well, what do you think, Hal?
We convict people of rape all the time, Arlen. You have to have strong evidence to prove it. We convict people of it all the time.
You think Hamas went in there were very polite and kind? And,
no, I just don't think that. They murder people, but but if you're going to say someone was raped, then where's the evidence that they were raped? Well, and then when the family says no, they weren't raped, then there it is. That's the end of it. Until you have your own evidence.
You have witnesses there, Hal.
There was no witnesses to that individual. They identified very few people. It was very hard to narrow down who they claimed was actually raped. And when the real dogged police work or investigatory work was done, there was no confirmation. Arlen, I sent you all the materials. I hope you read it. And you couldn't, and you didn't present anything to me to contradict what I sent you. Nothing.
Again, Hal, it's really hard to prove. Well,
then don't say it. If you can't prove it, don't say it. Then say, this is hard to prove. We believe this for these reasons.
Hal, there are witnesses who say they saw it.
There were the witnesses that said it were discredited, Arlen. Remember, did you see what I sent you about Zaka?
Just because they didn't produce, the evidence or whatever. I mean,
well, then how can you? Then you don't say it. Then you don't go out and say that this happened without evidence. And then, especially when the evidence, not only that, the evidence with respect to the person they did actually, you could find and identify wasn't raped. So it's not only that they didn't provide evidence that rape occurred, when they did claim it and when you could actually check it, it wasn't true. It was disproven.
I'm not so sure why this is important to you, I'll tell you this.
Because you're saying I'll tell you exactly why, and you tell me if you can understand. Because you're saying that social media is so dishonest and is so corrupted by the MAGA people and the fear. We have this terrible fear that Trump will take over and will lose everything because of social media. So therefore, we'll become totally dependent on corporate media like the New York Times. And the New York Times is as big a liar as any of them and is telling stories and doing it for the purposes of us being in a horrible genocidal war.
No, I disagree, of course. I think the New York Times tries to, do their best, tries to be, respectable and tries to get accuracy. And they've got top-notch people with good experience and award winners. But if you go to the other side, you go to social media, you go to, all the right-wing media, they're going to lie and not even care whether they're lying or not. So
So some of these wonderful sources, one thing that totally got my spidey sense going as I was reading that article in the New York Times was they quoted this woman. I want to get it because it was Jankowicz, Nina Jankowicz. So Nina Jankowicz is somebody else who's clearly not a credible source. So let's get this slide up here, Arlen. So here's what she says. Well, they got Jen Easterly. We're in the business of critical infrastructure, and the most critical infrastructure is our cognitive infrastructure. So we have to build resilience to misinformation and disinformation, I think is incredibly important. The problem is who decides? The director of cybersecurity and infrastructure security agency? What is that, right out of 1984? The Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, does that organization give you confidence that they're on your side? And to go beyond that, so DHS, Department of Homeland Security, also known for its wonderful pro-democracy views, had the Disinformation Governance Board. Its director was Nina Jankowicz, an expert in Russian disinformation. We'll get to her in a moment. But again, I'm trying to understand why do we believe that Jen Easterly is somehow the one we want to rely on for building resilience to misinformation and disinformation?
Well, we shouldn't, and we know, from experience in history that there's always going to be people who are not going to tell the truth, who are going to try to get their point of view across. I mean, this is just the way things are, and it's not a surprise. I mean, you can't expect everybody to be perfect and to be accurate. That's not realistic.
All right, so let's talk about Nina Jankowicz, because she's been, okay, so here was the other quote. This was the one I was actually looking for, the first one. It's very, very small. But she was complaining because of the Republican efforts. And by the way, the Republicans are just as bad. I'm not in any way defending the Republicans. My point is there shouldn't, if you have some sort of non-political, totally apolitical group, I don't know how you would set it up, sort of an overseeing board that doesn't have a lot of power, but can publicize when they feel there's dangerous misinformation online. I guess I would go there. This is what Nina Jankowicz said. There's a chilling effect on all this. This was the attacks on government for trying to stop the publication of various news items and various reports on social media. So Jankowicz said there's a chilling effect, meaning the Republican efforts to stop the government from reigning in social media. There's a chilling effect. Nobody wants to be caught up in it. So this is their source. So I just want to talk a little bit about Nina Jankowicz, because this, as soon as I saw that, I was like, okay, this is not somebody that is credible. Because you said they have credible sources. You said they're respectable people. So they rely very much on Nina. No, the New York Times. You said they rely on credible sources, right? Like a Nina Jankowicz. That's who they just relied on. So back in 2017, Julia Ioffe writes, turns out Trump Jr. corresponded with WikiLeaks. Nina Jankowicz's response, well, now we can call WikiLeaks what they are, scum. So to me, that's not respectable. That's not credible. Now, maybe it's fair. Maybe it's accurate if you want to say, well, they shouldn't be. WikiLeaks is a news media organization. Donald Trump Jr. is a news person, right? He's the son of the president. Oh, yeah. They did contact Donald Trump Jr. That's a fair and accurate statement. They did. And I looked very much into this because I was very curious. Well, what's going on here? Why did she call them scum? What did WikiLeaks do? WikiLeaks is one of those online media groups that Nina Jankowicz clearly hates and wants to stop and wants to rein in. And I guess the New York Times is on her side, right? Because they're quoting her. And why the hell can I? There we go. So let's get to.
Why do you assume that the New York Times agrees with her and
Because they quoted her with approval. Well, they quoted her twice in the article. Arlen.
Donald Trump a lot. That doesn't mean they support Donald Trump.
No, but they quoted her with approval. They never quote Donald Trump with approval. Every time Donald Trump's name is, the president claims falsely. The president lied when he said that there was. When he said that he was exonerated by the Mueller commission, by the Mueller report. The New York Times invariably uses words to diminish Donald Trump, to demean Donald Trump, to demonize Donald Trump. In this article, which you brought to my attention, Nina Jankowicz is cited with great approval because she was at the head of some disinformation group for 2 weeks that the government had set up and that subsequently had to disband, that it had set up to oversee the social media organizations. So they like her. They like her. Here's the messages. Here's what she did with, here's how here's the article from the Wall Street Journal. So couldn't be, not left wing, not liberal. Trump Jr. exchanged messages with WikiLeaks. So that's, remember, Jankowicz said WikiLeaks is scum because Trump Jr. had some messages, or WikiLeaks sent something to Trump Jr. That's the argument. And so there was a direct contact. So what was that contact about? Because I really was curious about this. So the contact was WikiLeaks reached out to Trump Jr. This was during the campaign, 2016, to say, hey, there's going to be a publication that shows that there were ties between your dad and Putin. We want to comment. What is it? What is your response to that? So that's totally within the realm. That's what media does. That's a story. There's a story that your dad was hanging out with Putin, and we want to know what you have to say about that. That's what you're supposed to do. That's what a good journalist does. There's the exact comment. Any comments? And Trump Jr. said no. That's it. For that interaction, Jankowicz, whom the New York Times calls, who's their source for why we need oversight of social media, she calls them scum. That's who she calls scum. So we'll get into why she really called them scum in a minute. But don't you think that's problematic, that that's one of their go-to people?
Yeah. I don't like that person either, and I disagree with that person. But then again, all the other things that are said and done by all these other sources are also, just as bad or worse. And the New York Times does make mistakes. There's no question about that. They write millions of words, every day or every week, and they're going to make mistakes. But in general, I think they're fairer than any of the right-wing media that I've seen.
Well, they might be fairer than Fox News, but that's a pretty low. They may be fairer than One American News or Newsmax, but I'd say those are pretty low bars, you said, Arlen. I mean, you're not really putting them up against, Eric Severide or Walter Cronkite. But I just want to talk about Jankowicz again because it's really important. The reason that corporate media, the reason that the Jankowiczes of the world really want to stop social media is because social media has exposed their nefarious wrongdoing, their evil deeds. They're inside the belly of the beast. They're the establishment. They're the elites. And WikiLeaks told you that they torture people, right? WikiLeaks told you that the U.S. military was complicit in that torture. Right. Now, if we start reining them in and we give government some power to say no more WikiLeaks, no more social media, we got to really be careful. We can't let social media go wild. Then suddenly, maybe we don't learn about it when our U.S. government is torturing people. So that's why you say, why do I get upset about it? This is why I get upset. Because New York Times needs WikiLeaks. We need them to expose what our government is doing. We cannot rely on corporate media to do that.
You and I agree on that. But you said yourself that all these other media are even worse. So I don't know why you're so intent on attacking the New York Times, who are...
Because they're the source of the article. Because they're the ones who came... Because it's the article that you brought that said from the New York Times that says we need to censor social media. So that's why I'm going after the New York Times. Clean up your own house first before you start complaining about how evil social media is. Do a better job with your own stories. If you're going to say social media is misleading people, misrepresenting people, and telling lies, well, then you better damn well have your own house in order, in my opinion, especially because what social media does is often expose the lies of the New York Times. It often exposes. That's how come we know that that woman wasn't raped, because of social media.
And who's gonna check what's going on the right-wing media?
Well,
I
that
mean,
social media does that too. Are you kidding me? It's that we're all, that's the point. The more there is, the more likely there used to be 5, 6 newspapers in some cities, and they were all constantly checking each other out and trying to come up with dirt on the other, and so they could one up them and maybe get circulation over them. So that's what we should want, is lots and lots of media, which is what social media provides. And yes, back then, what did you have? You had the World. You had Hearst's World, which started a war with Mexico, with Cuba, what started the Spanish-American War as a result of wanting to increase circulation, which is awful. I'm not defending that. I mean, I wish that we had some way to stop them from doing that. But that's the history of media. Is media does that. They do provide purple journalism and all this stuff. But one answer, when we had good media in this country, Arlen, if you want to know when it was pretty good, as good as it's been, 40s, 50s, 60s, we had some great journalists. There was a lot of competition still in the newspaper industry. The TV industry was regulated by the government, so they had to devote a certain amount of time to news.
Yep.
You had government-sponsored, paid-for media like PBS, which was actually not getting all that underwriting from oil companies back then. So we had better media then. But one of the most important factors was that we had much less wealth and income inequality. The richest weren't that rich. The rich could not dominate and control media and pervert it to their own uses. And that meant that media did a better job. They had to compete they had to compete to get more eyeballs, and also to a degree on credibility. I just want to get back to WikiLeaks, which is what Jankowicz is called scum, the New York Times source on all this. So it wasn't just they told us about the torture, they also told us about all these diplomatic cables, Cablegate. Hillary Clinton didn't like it. She called it an attack on the international community, the woman that the New York Times endorsed in the 2016 primary, so they're close to her. She didn't like it. Neither did Nina Jankowicz, obviously. The documents showed that the U.S. was conducting secret drone strikes in Yemen. Very, very important. Wouldn't you say that's the kind of thing we need to know?
Yeah, we're going to get that from Hal, though. I think I'd rather trust the New York Times than most places.
That didn't come from the New York Times. That came from WikiLeaks.
Yeah, well, I support WikiLeaks. I think our government going after WikiLeaks is terrible. I think they should be allowed to say whatever they want to say. But let me just get back to something you were talking about, the news media and how different it is compared to what it used to be. And the reason is, like you said, it's because they're owned by big corporations and billionaires who only care about money. And when they decided, hey, we can make a profit off of news, then all of a sudden all the relatively moderate news sources disappeared, and you have what you have now, which is basically.
Well, we have moderate news sources, and they don't necessarily buy the media to make a profit. They buy the media to use it as a propaganda outlet to bolster their other businesses. Because again, Bezos isn't making money from the Washington Post, unless, in fact, he lost a ton. But the moderate media is still there. But what we don't have is really progressive media. You don't think the New York Times is moderate? I'd say it's pretty moderate. I'd say the Washington Post is pretty moderate. So there is moderate media. I don't know why
you're attacking them so much, but okay. But they are moderate.
Because they get things wrong. They get things terribly, terribly wrong. And not only wrong, but they lie. They promote narratives that aren't true. So, and I'll give you some other examples, because I demand more. I demand more from my media than what I'm getting, much, much from the New York Times. And I'll tell you another reason why I have a huge problem with the New York Times, because people believe them. They accept what they say uncritically. So when the New York Times says Hamas committed all these rapes, then people believe it. And they're like, well, yeah, I don't like what Israel's doing, but I kind of get why they're doing it now. So that's why I have a problem with the New York Times, because they're running interference for a genocidal state.
Yeah, they make mistakes and they do things wrong. I agree. But who do you trust more than the New York Times and the Washington Post? Let me ask you that.
Who do I trust more? That's a really good question. That's one of the, you asked me why I'm depressed. I'm depressed because there's no one out there you can trust. There's nothing. Everything you read, you have to read with 10 grains of salt. Every media outlet has has agendas that go far beyond telling the truth. So I don't trust anybody particularly, no.
And what horrifies me the most, if Donald Trump gets elected president, you're going to have no choices, Harley. You know what he's going to do. He's going to have all his people.
Okay. So that's your response to all of this as well. Yes, the Washington Post is neocon. It promotes war, endless war. So did the New York Times. Yes, the New York Times is telling us that Israel committed all this sexual crimes, or Hamas committed sexual crimes, and we don't, without evidence to support that. But as bad as they are, they're not as bad as Fox. And if we lose them, that would be even worse than what we have now. Well, you know what? Maybe that's true. That's not good enough for me. Things are so bad right now that unless we totally change horses, unless we go in a very different direction, it's all over, Arlen. Yeah, and what the New York Times is doing and what the Washington Post do is they actually make it worse, because what they do is they send a message to you, which you believe, and many millions, tens of millions of others believe, well, Biden has your best interest at heart. Kamala isn't that incompetent. They really are trying to address the climate catastrophe. Israel isn't good, maybe, but what they're doing in Gaza is kind of understandable. So rather than saying a message, this is awful, things have to totally change. We've got to stop what we've been doing. And they could have sent that message in 2016, right? They could have said, we have to elect Bernie. Not that he's perfect, but he's head and shoulders above everyone else out there. They didn't do it. So that's why I'm so hard on them.
I want the New York Times to say, my feelings too, and give my point of view, just like you seem to want them to give your point of view. But I don't think that's realistic. There's going to be...
I expect them to be honest. It's not just that I expect them to give my point of view. I expect them not to give a point of view that is what that protects the interests of their owners, their reporters, and their advertisers, with zero regard, and to lie about the impact of what they promote. That's what I expect.
I'm not going to tell you the New York Times is perfect, that they never make mistakes, because they do all the time. But, I ask you, who would you trust more? I
told you. I just told you I don't trust anybody right now. Well, there's no one credible. It was so disheartening for me when I saw Jimmy Dore embrace climate denialism. I mean, that's incredibly upsetting. This is a guy who did tremendously important, valuable work pointing out the corruption of the so-called left wing in Congress, the corrupt squad, how they simply refused to ever take on Nancy Pelosi and the corporate elites in the Democratic Party. He did tremendous work doing that. And in many other areas as well. And then to see this guy go all over the, not crazy climate denialism is so upsetting. This is what's so awful, like the New York Times. I was saying, there are people who just accept what the New York Times says, carte blanche, is they can say whatever they want, no one, and they'll be quoted. And that's very, very, very scary. And then there are those who reject everything because it's in the New York Times, and that's equally scary. So they reject the climate holocaust because the New York Times is honest. It tells you the truth about the climate holocaust.
Oh, so the New York Times does get a lot of things right.
They got that right. They got that right. I've never said they don't get. I never said they got everything wrong, but they got the climate holocaust right. It's true.
I say they tell more truth than any other media that you could name right now. So, they're far from perfect and they make mistakes. I agree, but you don't want to condemn them.
So they're the least bad mass murderer out there. I'm supposed to be loving them. I mean, Arlen, your points don't really work for me. They're bad. They're not. They do a lot of bad things. I demand a lot more from them. What bothers me the most is that it seems to be a binary choice, right? Like you just said, well, they're better than everyone else, so we've got to embrace them. And I'm saying to you, they got some things wrong and they got some things right. What bothers me is people who either say, oh, they're great, we've got to embrace them and accept what they say, like you accept when they say there's all these rapes by Hamas, even though they're completely undocumented. And then you've got the flip side of that, which is just as bad, the Jimmy Dores who claim, oh, well, the New York Times says there's a climate holocaust going on, so it must not be true. I mean, those both wrong. We have to be willing to examine and investigate what we read and determine for ourselves whether it's true or not, based on all the evidence. And also recognize the...
That's for sure.
Jimmy Dore has provided a lot of valuable information and made some very good arguments in the past, and it's sad to lose him as a credible source, but we have lost him as a credible source.
If he's a credible source, which I don't buy, but that's your point of view.
Well, you don't think he kept telling you that Trump didn't conspire with Putin. He kept telling you that Mueller wasn't going to come up with anything, and he was right. Well, that's a perfect example.
Hal, there's tons of evidence that the Russians were very much involved in trying to help Trump get elected.
The question is not whether there were a few Russians in T-shirts, in sleeveless T-shirts in their basements typing out Facebook posts.
Oh, come on.
The question that was raised, the question that Mueller investigated was whether Donald Trump conspired with them. And he did not. Or if he did, showed an incredible amount of intelligence and was able to cover his tracks in a way he's never been able to do with anything else. So clearly, it would boggle the mind that he actually somehow was conspiring with Putin. You can say all you want. Well, Putin was involved. Putin this, Putin that. Fine. I haven't seen that evidence either. Yeah, there were a few social media posts that may have derived from Russia. It was a tiny little pittance of money that maybe some Russians spent on the election. The question I keep coming back to that Jimmy Dore kept pointing out was Trump did not conspire with Putin. The evidence isn't there. It's made up. It's fake. It's false.
That's not what Mueller
said.
It's a distraction. If you read the Mueller report, you would see lots of evidence.
No, there's nothing. Mueller had nothing. There was not one statement by Mueller that indicated that Trump had any contacts with the higher ups in the Russian
campaign. You're wrong.
campaign.
I think you're going along with what Bill Barr had to say.
No, I'm just. That's one thing. I ask you again. Show me then. Just show me the evidence. All I do is show me the documentation. Show me the documentation that Trump was somehow working with Putin.
Okay, I will do that because
I've asked you for that before and I haven't seen it. Just like I asked for hard evidence that there were rapes by Hamas. And see, Arlen, this is what I would say to you. Since you aren't able to prove your points, why don't you change your mind? That's what I can't get. Why don't you say, you know what? They're over the top. The criticism of Trump is way overblown. He's done some really bad things, but we're going too far with this stuff. I don't know why.
No, I don't. I think Trump is worse than they've been giving him. The coverage has been. He's going to be a disaster for this.
Who did he kill? Who did he kill? Who were all the people that he killed?
Look what he's done to this country. He's turned people against each other.
That's what the New York Times is doing. Arlen, that's what the New York Times is doing. That's what Hillary Clinton did when she called people deplorable if they supported Trump. That's turning people against each other.
You don't think Trump is worse than those people? You think
who did he kill? I want to know who he killed. I want to know if he's so evil, who exactly did he kill?
I don't think that's the question here, Al.
Well, bad people kill people. Bad people do bad things. Who did he kill? I can point to some really bad things he did. He locked up immigrants. He separated people from their families. That was really, really bad. That was one of the worst things. He continued, and I think he expanded Obama's drone program. That was really, really awful. There were a lot of things he did that were really bad. I'm not defending him. But if we're going to say he's this horrible monster on a par like with the worst criminals in all history, I really want to know. Give me the massacres for which he's responsible. What's he done that comes close to what the massacres in Gaza by Netanyahu that we're helping right now?
Yeah, but no, I don't think it's a totally different thing that you're looking for, Hal. I mean, Trump is not a war criminal, but he's done, he's lied, cheated, just to turn the country against each other and brought out lots of hate groups and, people.
So the
Yeah.
argument for censorship, the New York Times gives examples of ways that right-wing media or social media is a problem. So one example they give is the Hunter Biden laptop. We needed, all this came out, the Hunter Biden laptop before the election. We've got to be so worried about this. It looks like it's Russian interference. It wasn't. There was all these articles, they got all these security experts to say, this probably isn't even Hunter Biden's laptop. No one's proven it's Hunter Biden's laptop. It looks like it was a Russian plant. That was false. Social media got it right. It was, in fact, Hunter Biden.
What are you talking about, Hal? Don't you know that guy that they put up there as their top source for
the New York Post? The New York Post got it right, and the social media outlets that amplified it got it right. He was, in fact, it was Hunter. Are you saying it wasn't Hunter Biden's laptop?
Yeah,
Are you arguing that?
It's not, the stuff on it was not real. I think a lot of it was distorted.
I don't think that there's anything on it that wasn't real. Nothing was
planted
on it.
This guy was paid by the Russians to tell all these lies to Congress, which went along with it, and it would have Biden up for impeachment for lies. They never found any proof that he was a criminal in any way. I mean, come on, Hal.
I'd have to go.
We disagree.
The information was. I'll have to go back and look at this. The information was.
The Congress has nothing. They're just a bunch of MAGA freaks who have nothing.
Okay.
There was nothing on Hunter Biden's laptop.
There wasn't, except you're right. I wouldn't say there was nothing. There was evidence that, he was, clearly he was not qualified for the positions he got. It was just the son of but the point about Hunter Biden's laptop is that it was Hunter Biden's laptop. And the New York Times is arguing somehow that social media is guilty because they said it's Hunter Biden's laptop. What the Washington Post did, the New York Times did, is they said it's not his laptop. We don't know it's his laptop. That was the problem. I think I'm getting a call here.
The real problem is they were saying we have proof that Joe Biden is a criminal and that he was taking advantage of stuff. Yeah, we know Hunter Biden is a bad guy, but they never found anything that proves that Joe Biden was in any way involved. So, and that's what the Republicans were trying to tell us.
Hold on. We got a call, Arlen. Let me get the caller on. Hey, we got a caller. Who do we have? Hello? I guess they just hung up. I guess I just missed them.
You scared them off, Hal.
I must have. I must have scared them off. And why am I seeing? Oh, that's a different video. The point is that it was Biden's laptop, and all these so-called experts said it wasn't. And the New York Times and the Washington Post said we can't
anything other than that Hunter Biden was a bad guy. We knew that.
It's true, but it was his laptop, and the corporate media said it wasn't. They said it looks like this has been planted. It's faked. It's fake. That's what they were saying. They got all these so-called experts, security experts, to say this is all the hallmarks of Russian interference, meaning that the laptop had been planted. But it wasn't.
There was plenty of
that wasn't. The laptop wasn't planted, Arlen. That's the point. And corporate media said you can't talk about the Biden laptop because it's not even his laptop when it was. That's where the corporate media got it wrong.
In it that was important, Hal. Nothing that we didn't already know. How could you defend?
Okay. Well, obviously, I honestly, I don't even really, frankly, understand your position here. I really don't.
My position is.
Let's see if we can get the caller. All right, here we go. All right, we got a caller. Who do we have?
Hal.
Yeah, hey, Billy.
Hi, buddy. How you doing?
Good. How are you?
Hey,
I'm
Billy.
okay. Hello, Arlen.
You sound good. It's been a long time. I'm glad you took this opportunity to call on the show. Since you have been, don't answer. Don't call me when I call you. What's up? Go ahead. Tell me why I'm wrong and Arlen's right, because I know that's where you come down.
No, I mean, I just want to say this and get your response. Trump has repeatedly said that if we do not elect him, that there will be blood in the streets. He doesn't ever says, and there shouldn't be, please, my people, stand down. He threatens us. We vote for him or we die. How does that not make him the worst human alive? Go ahead, defend that.
Because he didn't kill any. Because he hasn't killed millions of people.
How?
Because that's why. Because he didn't destroy. Because wait, can I finish? Because he didn't destroy Iraq. He didn't turn Libya into a terrorist training zone. That's why.
How? If all you can do is tell me other things that I'm not talking about, you're not speaking to me.
You just said how is he not the worst person in the world, right? You just said how is he not the worst person in the world? So that means that every other person in the world is less bad than he is. So for me to refute your statement, I have to point out that somebody else did worse things than he did.
Who else has ever threatened us if we don't vote for him? Who else has ever threatened us to die if we don't vote for him? Who did that?
I don't think he quite said that, but Hillary Clinton certainly
He exactly said that. Why are you defending this monster?
And by the way,
he didn't say you're going to die if you don't vote for me. But I'll tell you what.
What did he say?
Hillary Clinton
you tell me what he
called.
Said.
Okay, all right.
And one other thing we're forgetting is that he tried to overthrow a free and fair election and put himself back in power when he lost. And he told everybody.
President for life. Donald Trump, president for life. Yeah, great, Hal.
So Donald Trump is a bad guy, and he may get reelected. And corporate media has a lot of failings and is losing money. And rather than the Democratic Party and the New York Times and the Washington Post saying, gee, how are we failing America? How are we not responding to the needs of the people? Their response is, let's shut down anybody who criticizes us. Let's censor
Why weren't you talking about the issue that I brought up, Hal? How come you're not talking about the issues that I brought
I don't
up?
disagree with you. I agree that Trump is a really bad guy. You don't want him to get reelected, right? You want him to be stopped, right?
I don't want to. How about you? Do you want him reelected, Hal?
No. But I don't want Joe Biden reelected either. But I don't want Joe Biden reelected either because Joe Biden is complicit in genocide. So I don't want him reelected either.
Journalists in jail. When did Biden threaten to put journalists in jail? I'll wait for you. Go ahead.
So you can point out that Donald Trump did some really bad things that Joe Biden hasn't done. Where does that get us? I can point out to you that I can point out to you that while Donald Trump was president, we weren't involved in a proxy war with Russia. Now we are. So that to me makes Biden
What does that got to do with his threat? Why are you bringing up other things than the thing I want to talk about? I called your show.
I just said his threats are really bad. I think it's really bad.
We don't
have to talk about what you want to talk about because we all agree. The question is, how do we stop him, right? Isn't that the question we should be asking? How do we stop him?
Well, we don't stop him by pretending that the other side is just as bad. There's something clearly.
Sure, we do. Because the way you stop him is you provide people.
Is president for life, Donald Trump, dictator, his son, his daughter. That's the threat to this country. You don't see that?
You provide an alternative that's better, that's clearly superior to Trump.
Well, clearly superior.
And that is not being done.
That is old man Biden and the Democrats. Did you ever notice the Democrats are like black? There's women. There's Jews. The repugnant ones don't have those people in their party.
All right, so first of all, Arlen will tell you that more and more black people are actually supporting Republicans these days.
How many have been elected? How many
that Trump got more Latino votes.
Senators are there?
Arlen, I'm gonna mute you, Billy, because we can't both talk.
And let's not forget that Democrats actually do things. They actually make improvements. They actually pass laws that help people.
So the improvements, like you mean being the record number of oil and gas barrels that were produced under the Biden administration, sure. Is that one of the records you're talking about?
Well, how about lowering drug costs?
Or how about like two of the most deadly? Or how about trying to make our for-profit healthcare system, which is incredibly deadly, leads to tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of bankruptcies every year, trying to just smooth off the edges just a little bit enough while still maintaining the extraordinary profits of this life-denying industry.
By the way, how did Trump's healthcare plan work?
So do you see? No, you see, you can bring up Trump all you want. It doesn't do anything because I agree with you. Trump's really bad. The point isn't whether Trump is bad. The point is, how do we come up with something that's clearly better than Trump?
Well, Biden at least will try to keep Obamacare and improve on it.
But Obamacare has been a disaster. Obamacare has we've seen record levels of healthcare costs under Obamacare. Obamacare has ensconced the for-profit death panels of the insurance companies in American life. Obamacare has led to the hollowing out of rural hospitals. We don't have them anymore. So Arlen, so you're saying, okay, so as bad as this is, as awful as it is, well, we got to accept it because look at how much worse Trump is. Do you see how wrong-headed, how misguided that attitude is, Arlen? Do you see why that's wrong? Yeah, that we have to unite for something much better than either Trump or Biden.
Do you think Biden's going to get anything done with the Republican opposition? You know, he's at least getting.
He did get things done. Biden got things done. He got the Mountain Valley Pipeline through, even though it was stopped in Congress. He got the drilling in the Willow Creek done. He got billions and billions and billions of dollars to go to Ukraine. He got all of that done. He got it all also for Israel to continue the killing there. And so Biden's got lots done, Arlen.
I mean, you want to get let Putin get away with invading Ukraine.
I don't want people. I want the killing to stop in Russia. And you brought up, and by the way, and we're going to have to end this because we've gone on for over an hour. But I'm going to show one more slide. This is your story. When I say your story, it's the story you wanted to talk about. So this is in regard to South Korea, because I wanted to get to that and briefly, because I looked at it and I thought it was pretty interesting, or I really did. So let's see if I can get that out of there. By the way, don't forget, you got to click like, you got to click subscribe. Where else are you going to get this kind of back and forth? Except on Halitics. Actually, you can find lots of other places.
You're going to get Billy Sunshine.
So the New York Times had a pretty cool op-ed. This was one of their better efforts. I have to totally agree with you on this one, Arlen. So a solution on North Korea is there if Biden will only grasp it. So what's the solution? Is it sending arms to South Korea and figuring out a way to start a proxy war and having endless death along the 38th parallel? Or is it to negotiate? Is it to say, okay, we don't really like Kim Jong-un and we're not really thrilled with him, but let's be realistic. Let's recognize that they're large and in charge right now. And the best thing we can do is negotiate and try to improve the quality of life for North Koreans and ratchet down tensions.
Yeah, but Donald Trump has a love affair with Kim. They exchange love letters, according to Trump. I mean,
but no, I'm agreeing. This is the right policy. Do you agree? This is what we should do, right?
Yes, we
should do. I agree. We both agree. We should not ratchet up tensions. We should be sitting down and talking to Kim Jong-un. And that's exactly the same thing we should do with Putin. Right? Is there any reason to see anything different between North Korea and Russia?
Big difference, because Putin invaded Ukraine, for no reason at all.
It was not no reason. You want to say that over and over. It has always been the Russian position that there has to be some buffer between Russia and the West. And it seems to me that's a pretty realistic position, and it's one that's very similar to the one the United States has had. So the response is, as they say, North Korea, the country is a formidable nuclear power, just like Russia. Its leader sounds increasingly belligerent, kind of like Putin, but not exactly. The president needs to get the wheels of diplomacy turning before it's too late. So the answer to that is it's always too late, and it's never too late. Yes, there's a war in Ukraine. Yes, it's a proxy war. Yes, we're fighting it. But that said, it's never too late. Let's get the wheels of diplomacy turning right now.
Yeah, we all love that, but I don't think you're going to get anywhere with Putin.
Well, you say you don't think it, but it hasn't been tried. But yet it hasn't been tried, has it? I absolutely do. I absolutely think Putin would welcome an opportunity to end the killing there, as long as he gets what he wants, which is to know that Ukraine is not going to be part of NATO, to know that there's going to be somewhat, and there's going to be a buffer between Ukraine and Russia. And those are perfectly reasonable, Arlen.
I think he wants territory, and he's not going to give up that territory.
Why do you think that? Are you his shrink? Have you been talking to him? Has he let you in on the secret? Because you say you think this and you think that. Maybe he does. But if that's what he wants, wouldn't you prefer that rather than him wanting the territory, we sit down and talk to him and we figure out if there's ways to resolve the issue without more carnage?
Well, yeah, I'm okay with the peace plans, but I don't know how you know so much about Putin. And
I don't. I could be wrong. I don't. I could well be wrong. But I speculate that Putin would want peace because it was only after years of provocation from Ukraine that he invaded Ukraine. And I also speculate that Ukraine sending right-wing militias into East Ukraine and shooting at the people there. Ukraine, the U.S. deposing the Yanukovych government at the Maidan coup. Yanukovych not exactly pro-Russia exactly, but certainly not pro-NATO either. So those are a couple of examples, Arlen, that I would.
Yeah, but Ukraine never attacked Russia that I know of. Do you?
You asked for provocations. I just gave them to you.
Provocation is a lot different than, attacking.
You said what provocations? I gave you the provocations. They wanted, you know what? Cuba didn't invade the United States when the Cuban Missile Crisis occurred, but the United States didn't want Russian missiles within range of Miami. Seems pretty reasonable to me. Well, sure. Moscow doesn't want NATO in Kiev. And I think that's pretty reasonable, Arlen.
But they went into Ukraine unprovoked and are trying to take that country over. And I agree we should have a peace process, but you're not going to get that. Putin.
I don't know what to do because it can't be clearer. It can't be clearer. We provoked to a very significant. I'm not necessarily saying what Putin did in response was correct, but to act like we're wholly innocent, that we had nothing to do with it, that we didn't act in a way that was foreseeably going to lead to what did happen is also unrealistic, Arlen.
Yeah, we certainly made our mistakes, no question about that.
Okay, so then let's try to stop the killing now. Since we're part of the problem, let's try to be part of the solution.
Of course, I agree with you on that.
All right, thank you. Well, that's going to do it, Arlen, because we went overtime. Unless you got something you want, I'll give you, as always, the final word.
Okay. Final word is you're wrong about everything and I'm right.
Okay. And I'll see you tomorrow. Fortunately, I get to respond to that with Arlen not on your screen. And trust you, I will. It is Halitics. Arlen's every Monday, although I think at some point I'm going to wear out my welcome, I guess is how you put it. You're always welcome. The back and forth is fine with me, Arlen.
If you'll take me, I'll be around next week.
I will, because I get 4 days without you, but you don't get 4 days without me. But I would say to you, Arlen, and we keep going, but I want you to do your friggin' podcast. I know you talked about it. You've talked about it. Maybe it should be just a quotation quotient.
Yeah, well, I know. I'm not going to do a political podcast, but
you don't have to invite me on it ever. I mean, if you take calls, I'll call you, but you never have to call me. You don't have to put me on it, but I want you to do it. Then I'll take quotes. Then I'll listen. I'll take clips and I'll play them and I'll respond to them without you even getting to defend yourself.
I'm actually happy coming in on Mondays for Halitics. That's enough for me.
That's awesome. We'll leave it at that. He's happy coming. I'm astonished. I love that because I would be happy if I were Arlen too, but I think we're the only two people in the world who feel that way. All right, that'll do.
Sunshine and Carl were listening.
They're not listening. See, they don't want to deal with me. All right, that'll do it. Thanks, Arlen.